In the depths of America's classified history lies a document so shocking it seems more like a Hollywood thriller than historical fact. But this is no fiction. This is Operation Northwoods, perhaps the most terrifying conspiracy that turned out to be absolutely true. Imagine a time when your own government contemplated attacking its citizens, blowing up civilian aircraft and staging terrorist attacks on American soil, all to justify a war. In 1962, the highest-ranking military leaders in the United States didn't just imagine it, they planned it, they signed it, and they proposed it to the President of the United States. Operation Northwoods represents the moment when the unthinkable became official policy, when the protectors contemplated becoming the predators. This wasn't a rogue operation or the product of a few extremist minds. This was a formal proposal, drafted and signed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that would have turned Americans against Americans in a plot to manipulate public opinion. The truth, as they say, is stranger than fiction. 1962 was a year when the world held its breath. The Cold War had reached a fever pitch, with the United States and Soviet Union locked in a deadly dance of nuclear brinksmanship. The Cuban Missile Crisis would push humanity closer to extinction than ever before. But beneath the surface, an even darker current was flowing through the halls of American power. The Kennedy administration was young, dynamic, but under immense pressure. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion the previous year had embarrassed the White House and emboldened Fidel Castro's Cuban regime. Anti-Castro sentiment in America had reached a boiling point, with many seeing the island nation just 90 miles from Florida as a communist dagger pointed at the heart of democracy. In Washington, the military establishment was growing increasingly frustrated with Kennedy's reluctance to take more aggressive action against Cuba. The Pentagon saw Castro as a cancer that needed to be cut out, while the CIA was still smarting from their failed attempts to assassinate the Cuban leader. This was the pressure cooker that created an environment where even the most extreme proposals could find their way onto the president's desk. The American public was gripped by Red Scare paranoia. Every newspaper headline seemed to bring new threats of communist expansion. Southeast Asia was in turmoil, Berlin was divided by a wall, and now Cuba had become a Soviet base of operations in America's backyard. The military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower had warned about in his farewell address was now operating at full steam, pushing for more aggressive action, larger budgets, and expanded operations. Fear was the currency of the day, and some within the government began to see this fear as a tool, something that could be manipulated, directed, and used to achieve their objectives. It was in this climate of paranoia, power, and desperate measures that Operation Northwoods was conceived, a plan so audacious that it would have once seemed impossible to imagine. What you're about to hear might sound like fiction, but every detail comes straight from declassified government documents. Operation Northwoods wasn't just a vague concept. It was a detailed military proposal that outlined specific acts of terrorism against American citizens. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest military authority in our nation, carefully crafted these plans with chilling precision. The proposals included staging the blowing up of a US ship in Guantanamo Bay, blasting holes in American vessels in Cuban waters, blowing up a US plane, sinking boats carrying Cuban refugees, and orchestrating violent terrorism in Miami, other Florida cities, and even Washington, D.C. These weren't just suggestions. They were elaborately planned operations, complete with casualty lists and detailed false evidence that would point directly to Cuba. One particularly disturbing scenario involved the destruction of a civilian airliner. The plan called for a drone aircraft, painted and numbered as an exact duplicate of a real civilian aircraft, to be substituted while the real plane was loaded with carefully selected passengers who had been secretly briefed and boarded under aliases. The drone would then be blown up by remote control while over Cuba, and the tragedy would be blamed on Castro's forces. The operation even included plans for casualty lists in US newspapers, which would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. They proposed developing a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. This would involve Sink, a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. The plan suggested planting bombs, staging arrests of Cuban agents, and launching a campaign of false evidence implicating Cuba. The document went into excruciating detail about how to create an incident which will demonstrate convincingly that a Cuban aircraft has attacked and shot down a chartered civil airliner. These weren't just hypotheticals. They were meticulously planned operations with specific timelines, locations, and methods of execution. The military planners even developed cover stories and planned how to plant false evidence that would convince the international media and the United Nations of Cuban guilt. The proposals included elaborate plans for manufacturing evidence, from planting Cuban documents and weapons to staging photographs and creating fake funerals for non-existent victims. They even considered using actual Cuban defectors to provide testimonials about their involvement in the attacks, creating a web of false evidence that would be nearly impossible to disprove. The mastermind behind Operation Northwoods was General Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a man whose military career spanned 3 decades. His signature appears on the document's most damning pages, a testament to how high this operation reached in the military chain of command. The very man tasked with defending America was proposing to attack it. These weren't just rough notes or casual suggestions. The documents, now freely available in the National Archives, span multiple volumes and hundreds of pages. Each proposal was typed, annotated, and signed by multiple high-ranking military officials. The level of detail is astounding, from specific flight numbers to exact locations for staged incidents, right down to the minute-by-minute timeline of how these false flag operations would unfold. The most shocking aspect isn't just the existence of these documents, but their clinical, bureaucratic tone. These papers discuss the potential deaths of American citizens with the same detachment as ordering office supplies. When the documents were finally declassified in the late 1990s, they provided irrefutable proof that the highest levels of the American military had seriously considered terrorizing their own citizens to achieve political goals. The Joint Chiefs weren't acting alone. The documents reveal an entire network of military planners, intelligence operatives, and government officials who contributed to this scheme. Each branch of the military had representatives who added their own suggestions to the operation. The Air Force proposed the aerial scenarios, while the Navy detailed how to orchestrate attacks in Guantanamo Bay. The level of interdepartmental cooperation in planning these atrocities is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all. These declassified documents show that Operation Northwoods wasn't just one plan, but rather a series of proposals, each more elaborate than the last. They were continuously refined and expanded upon over several months, suggesting that the military leadership was deeply committed to this course of action. The paper trail reveals multiple drafts, revisions, and improvements to the original concepts, demonstrating just how serious they were about implementing these plans. When President Kennedy was presented with Operation Northwoods in March 1962, his response was an immediate and emphatic rejection. He was reportedly disgusted that his own military leaders would suggest such actions against American citizens. This wasn't just a simple no. Kennedy's rejection of Operation Northwoods marked a significant turning point in civilian-military relations and highlighted the growing divide between political leadership and military thinking during the Cold War. The incident reveals a military establishment so focused on achieving its strategic objectives that it had lost sight of basic moral and ethical considerations. This wasn't just about Cuba. It was about a mindset that had developed within the highest ranks of the military, where the ends could justify any means, no matter how extreme. The Joint Chiefs had become so fixated on the perceived communist threat that they were willing to sacrifice the very principles they were sworn to protect. Similar patterns of military overreach can be found throughout Cold War history. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, which sparked major escalation in Vietnam, has long been questioned by historians. The FBI's COINTELPRO operations targeted American citizens under the guise of national security. These weren't isolated incidents, but rather symptoms of a broader institutional willingness to subvert democratic principles in the name of fighting communism. This reveals a darker truth about institutional thinking during times of extreme political tension. When fear becomes the driving force behind military and political strategy, the unthinkable becomes thinkable. Operation Northwoods wasn't just a proposal. It was a window into how quickly democratic institutions can be corrupted by their own defenders. The military planners behind these proposals weren't rogue actors or extremists. They were the establishment, the trusted guardians of American security. The implications of Operation Northwoods extend far beyond its historical context. It serves as a cautionary tale about the potential for abuse of power, even in democratic systems. The fact that such a proposal could make it to the president's desk raises serious questions about the checks and balances within our military and intelligence communities, questions that remain relevant today as we continue to balance security concerns with democratic principles and civil liberties. The revelation of Operation Northwoods decades after its proposal sent shockwaves through American society, fundamentally altering how many citizens view their government's capacity for deception. When the classified documents were finally made public in 1997, they provided irrefutable proof that high-ranking military officials had seriously contemplated false flag attacks against American citizens. This wasn't just another conspiracy theory. This was conspiracy fact. The impact on public trust has been profound and lasting. Every time a tragic event occurs, a segment of the population now immediately questions whether there might be hidden government involvement. While most of these modern conspiracy theories are unfounded, Operation Northwoods gave them a historical precedent that can't be ignored. It demonstrated that at least once, such plots weren't just the product of paranoid imaginations, but were actually proposed at the highest levels of military leadership. Today, as we grapple with questions of government transparency and accountability in the digital age, Operation Northwoods stands as a crucial reminder of why oversight and civilian control of the military are essential. It shows us that without proper scrutiny, even our most trusted institutions can contemplate the unthinkable. The operation's legacy lives on in every debate about government secrecy, in every Freedom of Information Act request, and in every push for greater transparency in military and intelligence operations. The ultimate lesson of Operation Northwoods isn't just about what happened in 1962, it's about eternal vigilance. In a world where the lines between truth and deception often blur, where national security concerns frequently clash with democratic principles, we must remember that the price of freedom isn't just eternal vigilance against external threats, but also against the potential for abuse within our own institutions.